Neon Coma, greetings, greetings, greetings. Black people around the world. It's Montsho and Nwasha coming in to talk to you and share some insight, some thought-provoking information around phenomenon that's happening in today's world.
All right,
So what we're talking about today is something that is pervasive in the social media era, and it is permeating in the relationship space, but it's also all over the place, really, in multiple different spheres of information, education, initiation that we are sharing, and that is this new phenomenon of non-student teachers. So let us define what we mean by non-student teachers. Non-student teachers are people who have elected themselves as qualified to teach. And whether that is they've had a cursory glance with a high-level teacher, a grandmaster teacher, a master, or they've read some books, or they've studied some content online for 2 years or 3 years hard, or whatever it is, and they've elected themselves qualified to come before the people and give information that could move the people in a direction of their choice. So they're not really affirmed by anyone. They haven't really completed anybody's course of study, and so they've elected themselves. Now, where we do advocate self-teaching in this present system, because when it comes to education, it's so much stuff left on the table, left off the table. At the same time, we are advocates of the eternal indigenous black tradition that says each one teach one. In other words, you can't just qualify yourself. Someone else whom is qualified has to qualify you, because there is psychological, biological, and sociological rigor and qualifications that you must reach in order to teach. This is very, very, very important in the in the relationship space amongst African people, especially in the Western world, because we are the most unmarried people in the history of people, right? In the history of the world, in the history of people. And, you know, we would have conversations with our dear friends, Kavan Shah and Aja Shah, known by everybody as Professor Griff and his beautiful wife Soleil. We'll talk to them often about collaborative stuff that we are planning to do together, and we would talk about how to present concepts and ideas, and we would always be mindful of the fact that we don't want to sound like or do things like these non-student teachers that's out here. And Griff would always say, like, yo, where do these people come from? They just pop up and have elected themselves because they've been studying something for 5 years or 3 years or whatever, and they think that they're qualified to teach. And in no indigenous culture is something like that sufficient, especially if what you're studying is the current dogma of the time. Like, you just consuming content. You may have read a couple books, and you may have even talked to a couple people, but you're not really, really studying the breadth, and certainly not the depth of the information. So what do you say to that?
Sometimes even less than a couple of books, and less than
Yeah, I'm being kind.
Some people have an idea, and we're living in a great time where you can go directly to a lot of people. And, in business, being direct to consumer is great. But when you're talking about spirituality, relationships, things that are you need some level of tried and true, truths that you can actually reproduce. So that's what we want to talk about today, because in order to teach, you always have to work on yourself. And we know that in other professions, you're going to be continuing your education, maintaining a certification of some kind. That means that even if you're an expert, you have to go back and do the test, or go back and, even if you're just paying, right? You have to keep
Right.
saying that you want to do this thing and that you're going to keep moving forward. And I think a lot of times we're in a space where the non-student teacher is marking a kind of resonance with a pain point that people are vibrating with, right? So
Right.
if you're talking about the pain point, and a person if you can continually get a person to say yes, like, yes, that's it, and yes, that's me,
Right.
and yes, that, what happens is the person continues to trust a little bit deeper and follow you into whatever you're talking about. And what we have seen with the non-student teacher is that often the person stops teaching after a while, or they disappear from the space because it wasn't actually a passion or something tried and true. It was a moment, a phase, right?
Right.
Something
A
that they were
trend.
going through. Definitely. And it could be your personal testimony even. But when it's not in the realm of being complete or holistic. So that is, one of the challenges. So if we as teachers, and every teacher that we have even worked with has continued to be a student in some way. So even in spiritual space, they have their elders, their guides, they're connected to a greater system that proofs what their message is to a certain extent, beyond them, right? So Montsho and I talk about something that we learned in business. I have to, when I'm working with myself, my family, my husband, my children, my clients, I have to Nwasha proof certain things in order for things to work, right? Because I have a personality that has strengths and weaknesses. Montsho has to do the same thing in order for
Montsho
something to
Yes,
work.
absolutely.
We have to be able to say, okay, the children can get up and go to school, and this is Nwasha proof. If I would have stayed in bed, if I don't have to, wear a certain outfit or uniform, right? It doesn't matter what is going on with me personally. I need to be able to take my strengths and then kind of proof this system in myself or my marriage or my family or my business that goes, that accounts for my weaknesses. And I think that when you are a non-student teacher, it could be that something is resonating with a strength, but proofing your message for your weaknesses is not always there. And it's the 5 things that we're going to talk about today, because we want people to, use everything that you can to get information to be better, to do better, especially in the relationship space, which we believe is the most important facet of your life, right after your personal health, is how you interact with other people, how you relate. And much of health is, I think, about relationships.
Absolutely.
Because we kind of hurt our health when we're sad or when we're, not accountable to others. So I believe relationships are so extremely important to us. And so I want anyone to use anything that is good for them to be better. The challenge when you're in a saturated space, whether that is, just have access to ask questions, to Googling, to ChatGPT, and to the overwhelming so-called relationship advice, is that we don't know that things are not good for us because it's just saturated information. And once you click on something, it's going to keep feeding you similar things, which is a kind of bias
Right.
when you're looking to support yourself. So the problems with the non-student teachers
So we're going to give you five
are, yes,
things that you need to really understand about these non-student teachers, and then talk quickly about 5 things that you must have if you're going to seriously follow anyone in this relationship space, because every social scientist, every spiritual person, every roundaway girl or brother is saying, boy, roundaway boy, roundaway girl, homeboy, homegirl. Everybody is saying black relationships are at an epidemic, critical crossroads. We have got to figure out what is going wrong in relationships and fix it, or else we are doomed. So all these people talking about breaking generational curses. If you talking about money, you're insane, because money will never break a generational curse. In fact, the actual curse is the breakup of the family. So to break the generational curse, we have to mend, create, replicate, duplicate families. And so the intimate relationship is the seed of the family and the nation. So the 5 things you must understand about these non-student teachers. Number 1, in general, they lack qualifications, but in specific, what they lack is a specificity or a particular thesis, right? And this is very important, because in the world today, if you want something done well, you want a specialist. Think about it. If it's your home and it's the roof, you don't want a general contractor. You want somebody who specializes in roofing. Or if it's plumbing, electrical, etc. If you go to the doctor and you have a foot problem, you want a podiatrist, not a gynecologist. And conversely, if you have a womb problem, you want a gynecologist, not a podiatrist. You know, if you have something wrong with your arm, you don't want an ophthalmologist, right? You want a bone doctor, right? What's those people called? I forgot what the bone doctors are called.
I know OS is the
Yeah. Osteo. If you have osteoporosis, you want an osteoporologist, whatever they're called. But again, you want a specialist. And a lot of people out here who are searching for relationship help, they're looking to how to reconnect after an affair. They're looking for how to court, mate, date, and select the right mate. They're looking at how to blend families. They're looking for how to harmonize styles. They're looking for specialty things. And some of these people out here talking about everything. And they follow the trends of celebrities and all kind of things that are a very slippery slope for us to follow. So they're not really operating from a specific thesis. They don't have a specialty. It's just a bunch of disparate ideas that they have. So that's number 1. Number 2, because they are really non-student teachers, they are not really studying the subject. They're not really studying black relationships. They ride the wave of the trend today. So they may quote a couple statistical facts or data from 50 years ago, but they're not really studying the trend of relationship over the last couple thousand years, right? And somebody who is highly qualified really understands this course of study from a longitudinal study, because you can see some trends that have happened to us as a people, and you could understand exactly why we are in the position that we're in today, what is inevitable and imminently on the horizon, and how we can most quickly get out of our situation. But if you don't really have a course of study, you don't really got no hindsight. You don't really know what's going on. So that's number 2. Number 3,
they lack a deep kind of insight.
Yes.
So although hindsight is important, we don't only ever want to be in the past. We talk a lot about what many problems are in our interaction with ourselves and with others, is that we're too much in the past or too much in the future, right? A lot of dread, depression, anger is in the past. A lot of anxiety, worry, confusion is about what could happen in the future. And where we miss, especially in intimate relationships, is actually being present. So it is important for us to have a certain amount of hindsight, and we need to have insights. We need to know about ourselves. We need to know who we are, where we are, why we are. These things are really important, because I think we talk about this often. A lot of times in intimate relationships, we are lost in the fact that everything feels so personal, because we have a personal set of senses, right? So what I see is the only perspective of sight that I really know. Even when I'm with another person, right? You'd be like, oh, did you see that? No, the other person didn't see it, even though we're in the same spot and at the same moment. I think when we talk to people in counseling, and even I know I have felt this way, hey, I have this feeling right now, or this thought, or this wish, or this goal, and without actual insight about who I am and where I am and how I communicate and how I have gotten myself into my relationship and all of those types of things, we can make generalizations. We can, this is where I think a lot of the all men and all women kind of comes from. We have a limited interaction, really, but if we don't have the hindsight and we don't have the insight, we're casting things that probably only happened to us because of it was us, right? Like, we have a certain kind of being, mannerism, desire, approach that we got the reciprocity for. And a lot of times, that's not in the non-student teacher presentation, right? It's not in the awareness that they might be a testimony, like I said in the beginning. It could be, hey, I went through this and this is what I experienced, and that's always valid. And I also think always worthy of connection. It's also not a teaching point in that you can replicate a single testimony,
right.
A single trial. We would never do that in any other category, have a one-off thing be the representation of everyone.
Yeah, and I think you see it a lot because everybody tells a personal story or anecdotal information where they'll be like, I knew this guy, or I had a cousin, or this happened to me, and that's it. That's not really a broad enough understanding of what's going on to really lead people to change, to the change that they want in intimate relationships. So number one, they lack specificity or general thesis. Number two, they lack hindsight, previous understanding of what's going on in Black love relationships. Number three, as Nwasha said, is they lack insight, and insight gives you balance. It really helps you see masculine, feminine. It's a lot of man hating, woman hating out here that a lot of the influencers pretend they don't have, but when they start talking, you can see they're not operating from a place of balanced love. So those are the first three. Number four
is foresight, right? So they lack foresight that is very necessary for us to actually understand how we're going to move the generations. So you have to have a penetrating foresight that means that you know where you're going, right? So for us, that includes cultural initiation, because where we are and holding true to certain values and beliefs is extremely important, because again, you don't want to be in an isolated situation where all you care about is the present moment, right? So in African thought and indigenous experience, the hindsight, foresight, and the hindsight, insight, and foresight are a cyclical kind of thing, and it's also kind of like a triad of support, right? It's the three things that are going to help you really understand each one of those three things. So in the present, we have value for the hindsight, right? Because we're learning. That's our experiential wisdom, whether it's our parents, our ancestors, our own life. We can learn from yesterday. We can only apply what we learn, though, in the present moment. And the idea behind that is I can guide myself. Now, I don't know the future, like in my person and in my experience explicitly, but I can make decisions about if I'm going in this direction. Here is my ability to have foresight. I have a vision. I have a mission. I have purpose, right? Those are things that are indigenous to Black people, right? The idea that we live this way, that from the cultural perspective, we are living out a destiny, right? So even when we're coming together in intimate relationships, there's purpose for two people to come together. There's purpose for those two people to recreate themselves with children. And that has meaning. It's not accidental or, circumstantial. And these things are extremely important, because if you follow a non-student teacher that doesn't have foresight, you don't actually have an idea of where you're going into the future.
Right.
If they don't have a vision for where they're going, there's no way that you can go
Get a
somewhere
vision
that
from
they don't
following
even
them.
know
Right.
that they're going. So this is something that is extremely important to note. Where are you picking somebody up in? Are they in their phase of hindsight and reflecting on the past? Are they in the, YOLO in the present?
Right.
Or, is the future one of doom and gloom? That's
Right.
not the foresight that you actually want. So you need something that can penetrate through what is the, mirage of this time and actually guide you where you want to go, not where you think you have to go, or, sometimes the pessimistic view of doom and gloom is the future that's being cast to us as Black people. So when that is the only message, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If your teacher is talking about doom and gloom and that's all they're teaching for the future, then it's kind of inevitable that you're going to end up there. So that's something that you have to be on the lookout. If you're looking at who should I get my information from, can I tell if this person is actually qualified to help me? Not if they don't have great penetrating foresight.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think in business and in all areas of life, we learn that the most successful people are people who can operate with a certain level of discipline fundamentals, but they can also see coming trends before they happen. And I think in the Black relationship space, it's the opposite. People are hopping on trends once they become popular, and a lot of times they don't even realize until afterward the trend has run its course. So, everyone came out talking the high level of Black love, and then we flipped into that to the gender war, and everybody was talking about the gender war. Some people are still on that wave, and the gender war conversation is over for most people who are serious in this space. We're really talking about the development of systems and skills, and this is where 85% of the people who talking in Black love relationship spaces are falling off, because they don't really have systems and they don't really have time-tested skills that they can share and trade. They got a lot of opinions, a lot of stories, a lot of sensationalism. Well, what if this happened? And and this, that, and the dude. Ooh, they got a lot of that. But when it says, like, how do I vet someone? What are the steps? If we say we have a 7-step system that helps you vet people, and we can teach it to you, you can teach that system to 20 other people. And now the vetting process becomes much more refined. But if you say, yo, we just rambling, we just talking, that's a lot of what you're getting. So the last thing is kind of precursor to it, is systems. We're in a time where if you're going to learn something, systemizing things and having systems to things simplify. It makes it easy to understand, easy to duplicate, easy to replicate in other places, right? And so you need systems. So for love, you need systems. You need systems on how to court and how to mate and how to harmonize styles and how to argue, how to communicate. You even need sexual systems, right? You need systems to make your relationship work. If a person ain't teaching you systems, a person really isn't teaching you. They're beating up your ears with thoughts and ideas and opinions. You in church, right? So you getting pulpit rebel rousing, but you're not really getting a system of how you can change. So these non-student teachers have these 5 characteristics among others. They don't have specificity. They lack hindsight. They lack real deep insight. They don't have foresight of what's coming, and they can't teach you systems. So when you're listening to them, you may get some sensationalism. You may like looking at them. They may be attractive or something like that, because a lot of people talking are simply that. The other group has sensationalism, where they're talking like the craziest stories in the world, or somebody standing up in a pre-recorded or calling in a podcast and telling some outlandish story that's going on. So this is why so many people say relationships out here are crazy because of these kind of things. But the reality is some of them stories are 10 years old, and most of the people talking are not even in relationships. So they don't really represent what the landscape of relationships are. The truest representation of the landscapes out here is that people don't know what they're doing. And it's evident by even who they're listening to, because they're listening to people who don't know what they're doing. So you want to watch out for those 5 things, but in contrast to those 5 things, you want to have these 5 things when you're talking about anybody who you should be following or listening to or getting information from that is useful. Number 1, they got to be in a relationship. They have to be married. Let me say this. They have to be married 7 years or more. Why married? Because marriage is the highest level of commitment in the intimate relationship space. People who just hanging out, people who just kicking it, for whatever reason, they haven't made the ultimate commitment. And whatever the reason is that they may say that is, cultural, spiritual, whatever, they have now nullified themselves from talking to everyone. When you occupy the highest space, you could talk to everyone else in kind of a pyramidal dispensation, like you going from the highest point down. But if you're only to the middle of the pyramid, you can't talk from the highest point, and so you limit yourself. So marriage is the biological, psychological, sociological, legal, and past, present, future dynamic of intimate love relationships. It's a business, it's a spiritual contract, it's a blood contract, it's so many things at once. And if you're not at the highest level, you can't speak from there. Also, if you haven't completed one life cycle, which we call a 7-year period, is one cycle of life where you go through changes every 7 years as an individual, but in a relationship, your relationship goes through major changes every 7 years. You haven't really been tested in a relationship, so you can't verify that your relationship has the wherewithal to make it, because it's how we respond to the challenges that qualify our relationship, not how cute we look together in the about last night pics. So number 1, before you follow anybody, they have to be married for 7 years or more. This disqualifies 90% of the people who are talking in the relationship space, and I think that's amazing. So number 2.
I think for Black relationships, this is extremely important. A person that you're following, that you're getting information from, that you're reading their book or taking their course, they should actually love Black people and Black culture. That's extremely important, because if there is if we're battling our inner enslaved person, then we are not at the position, again, to talk to the most people, right? So this is something that you have to ask. You should be able to discern from the information that they give, but you can directly ask. Again, this is in the name of the foresight, right? That you know where someone is going based on their belief and their values. If a person doesn't value Black culture and love Black people, this is when you're dealing with someone who is in the midst of a trauma, you have to love something about them, right? Because they're presenting in a way that this is what we call in our field trauma-informed, right? If you're talking to someone who doesn't love Black people, who hates on Black women or Black men, then that's not the person to take any kind of guidance from. They're still in a position where they're dealing with an aspect of trauma, potentially, and that's their present moment, right? They're getting the insight, hopefully, and that's a person that you should be looking for, is someone who is saying that they love Black people and that they love and value Black culture. So, number 3?
Number 3. In order for you to listen to someone about Black intimate love in the modern day, even indigenous Black love from past days, or the glorious black love that is imminent on the horizon. They have to understand the global system of racism, white supremacy. And I'm going to extend this to say any person who positions themselves as a master teacher in economics, education, entertainment, fashion, food, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, or war, and they don't understand the greatest threat to black life, they don't understand the most awesome dysfunctional entity that has existed in the last 6,000 years, they're insane. So you should never follow a person talking about intimate black love when they don't know the psychological impacts of this global system on black men, black women, black children, and how it is present even when we're in our sleep. If you don't understand that, striving to help someone navigate this will be like running at 100 miles an hour into 100 brick walls. You will break your brain open and you will not be able to understand what is missing. To put it short, like our luminaries, Dr. Neely Fuller and Dr. Frances Cress Welsing said, until you understand the system, what it is, how it works, and why it exists, everything else you think you understand will only confuse you. So this is the greatest challenge to black existence. And to try to be talking about relationships without a thorough understanding of it is, is just suicidal. So they must understand this global system.
And the fourth thing that you would want for the person that you're following you want this person to have some credential outside of social media. So this is important because social media, any kind of curated space is just that.
It's
right?
fake.
It's not complete.
It's fake.
It's not complete. So if someone you only know them of the podcast and they have put themselves there, if they have a great personality, you can garner a lot of followers off of your personality, which doesn't mean that you actually are qualified to guide someone. Now, so that means if somebody has a popular page, if someone has a popular show, right, that doesn't
If you're
mean,
pretty.
Yeah, if you're just beautiful, that's not an actual credential. Now, the thing about credentials is they are also potentially void of what you actually need. But in a time where popularity is the biggest currency, we sometimes don't even look for the credential. Even when you look for a credential and say, oh, like for Montsho and I, oh, you're counselors, or you have a certain degree, or you have a certain certification, all it shows is that you desired to study something deeply, and kind of, depending on where you get the credential, you've paid some money, right, to be credentialed in some way. We're saying that at the bare minimum, someone else had to validate something about you in getting your credential, right? So this is something that you want to consider. If a person's in business, you want to know how and where they got their business information from. If a person is telling you about health, you want to know how and where they learned and studied and are qualified to treat
And they better be healthy.
Right? Because in this time, amazingly, we have people who are following someone's health advice and they're not credentialed in anything, right? Following someone's business advice and something potentially was a fluke or something. One of the biggest scams outside of relationships is, I can teach you how to XYZ, but actually all you're doing is selling a course, right? You're a master at marketing to get someone to purchase a course, potentially is something that you don't even actually know how to do or have ever done yourself. Your skill set, it might not be in that actual thing, but so many times we don't look at the credential, right? We don't look at what someone has been, how and when and where someone has been validated outside of the social presentation. And I think that that's very important in intimate relationships because you have to have a certain care when you're doing things that relate to the heart. This is my belief, right? That you need to care about what you're saying and how you're saying it and where you're guiding someone. And sometimes that credentialing teaches you how to communicate, how to guide, instead of bully or coerce or so many other things that we could do. So it's extremely important for you to say, who is this person? And it's not the stop to say, oh, this person has this credential, but it's the idea of investigating even what that is. A lot of times Montsho and I talk about people stopping at a statistic or stopping at misquoting a study, accidentally quoting fiction as fact, right, because of the way we get one-off lines. And I think that this is a time where we're not looking for credential, for evidence, for corroboration in any kind of thing before we just completely run with it. And I think this is very important. If you're taking life advice and relationship advice, you want the person that you're following to be credentialed in something. That means that other people looked at their work, other people taught them, other people validated something about them, and that is some level of assurance that it's not a one-off.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because the ultimate credential is the stuff you saying works. Like, that's the ultimate credential. Like, you don't have to have a degree, some advanced degree or anything like that. You don't have to be some cookie cutter template of what qualifies you. But the one thing you have to be able to do is show forth and prove that what you're talking about works with others. So you need to have a long list of testimonials that, hey, this is something that actually worked for me. And most of these people cannot produce that. They will talk about the fact that they have that, but you don't see that first person saying, hey, this and this system helped me to do X, and because of that, I'm greater in my relationships. Most of these people don't have that. So that brings us to the final point. So we said, in order to follow someone, they need to be married 7 years or more. They need to really love black people and not just be talking about a trend or spewing hate to one gender or the other. They have to love black culture so that they're not trying to make you chocolate-covered white folks, that they understand that we have a valid system of love, language, poetry, art, rich history that's thousands of years old, that goes way beyond Rome, so we don't have to say romantic, right? And all other things that are within the context of that. So they got to love black people and love black culture, number 2. Number 3, they have to understand the greatest threat to black people and black culture thoroughly. If they don't understand the 4 stages of this global system called racism, white supremacy, and why it exists, then they won't be able to help you in your relationships. They'll just be talking about the 5 love languages or something like that. That is not going to change black relationships. Number 4, they have to have a credential of efficiency, efficacy, effectiveness that stretches beyond social media. I just got a dope mic and a lot of passion. I'm cute, or I got a beautiful background. So now I'm ready to teach everybody about the ideas that I feel around relationship. And finally, and number 5, they got to have systems. So we said in the other group that the 5th thing was the studentless teachers don't have systems, but people that you follow, they must have a system. In other words, if you're trying to deal with infidelity, they need to have a system written out in a book or in a program or something that is beyond just the podcast of the day or the week that is popping, that you could go back to and see what are the 5 or 6 steps for me to overcome infidelity, and how long does it usually take? What are the 7 steps to vetting? How do I build a court around me, and what are the steps to that? How do I communicate effectively in a matter of 3 minutes when men and women speak and think so differently? How do I harmonize styles? with my partner when we see the world so differently and we come from different backgrounds, suburbs, cities, oldest child, middle child, only child. How do we harmonize styles? How do we resolve conflicts when conflicts are arising on a daily basis? Not just a theory about how to do it, but an enumerated step system that I can test over and over again to check its reliability and its validity, right? A person has to have systems. If they don't have systems, they just talking. And there's nothing wrong with us kicking it and talking, but we're talking while the world is passing us by. We're talking while our children are suffering in broken homes. We're talking while black relationships in the Western world are the worst in the history of the world of all the people that existed ever. And we're the parent people of humanity who taught everybody how to be in relationships. So that is a really sobering reality. So if you listen to somebody and they don't have no systems, you just like an ambulance chaser. You like the paparazzi. Like you want a picture with no substance behind it, and you'll create the story yourself. You'll dig in the garbage to get trash or anything that you think is salacious or sensational to get the people up. But you ain't really, really, really about this life where you're trying to move black people from where they are to where we should rightfully be. And these are the 5 things that you must have. And the previous are the 5 things that you should stay away from. So what you got to say to that? So that's it. So that's really it. We wanted to come on and share the 5 things to stay away from and the 5 things that you should have or move forward to before you listen to anyone.
So you can clean up your feed, unfollow, follow.
Yeah, unfollow, follow.
But
now,
make sure that you clean up your personal algorithms to make sure that you're in the lane of what you want to get.
Yeah, you ain't getting the relationship fodder that's out here. Now, obviously, dear brother and sister leaders, we are people who possess the 5 things that you should have. We definitely have been married over 20 years. We definitely love black people and love black culture. Our names even mean that when you understand the meaning of our names. So we're living that daily, every day. We definitely understand the 4 stages of this global system called racism, white supremacy, and why it exists, and how to systemize and destroy it from right in your home. Even what you invest and divest, what you invest to and divest from, right? So we have that. We definitely have credentials outside of social media. If our dear beloved brothers and sisters weren't here, we wouldn't even be in these social media spaces because, simply put, although they can shorten space and time for some of us, they're not real experiences. And we desire and crave for real human interaction and contact. However, we are grateful to our dear brother, Igmekwali, who brought this supercomputing from Nigeria, the Nigerian scientist that made supercomputing possible so that we could all have these, YouTubes, Facebooks, LinkedIn's, 1,000 different things that we can connect on. So we're grateful that these tools exist. However, we definitely got the credential outside of this social media, whether it's the academic credential, the cultural, the spiritual, and most important, the experiential, coming up on 25 years in a couple of months. So, but most of all, and most importantly to you, the thing you care about the most, we have a system. We have a program called Akoma Soul. Akoma, of course, is this beautiful symbol that is an ancient African symbol of the sacred science of soulmates and complementary science, right? The science of complements that ancient African people brought to the world, that has a symbolic meaning that is being miscalled the heart today. This is not a heart. This is not the organ in your chest. It's an akoma, an ancient African cultural, spiritual symbol about the divinity of soulmate love, right? That's what the symbol is. But our program, Akoma Soul, the word soul is an acronym for self and others understanding love systems. And so we're teaching you those love systems so that you can have expansive love legacy that lives long beyond your physical life. So we're going to teach you how to develop life and love purpose. We're going to teach you how to develop a court, whether you're single or coupled. We're going to teach you how to select, vet, and commit to a mate if you're single. But if you're married, we're going to teach you how to build the community around you that's going to give your relationship distinction and perspective. We're going to teach you how to communicate in 3 dimensions where you're deep, dynamic, and deliberate with your communication, and you're speaking to your partner in a way that moves the relationship forward. We're going to teach you, number 4, how to harmonize styles as men and women are eternally different. Number 5, we're going to bring emotional vulnerability and emotional fitness into our intimacy, into our relationship to create a high level of intimacy so we can have intimacy and sexuality from an African holistic perspective. Number 6, we are going to help you to resolve conflicts. All couples have conflicts, and you need a system to resolve it with effective, efficient, and elegant techniques, right? So you can get in it and out of it quickly and not have it linger on. And one day when you're walking down, when you're riding in the car together and somebody say the wrong thing, the next thing they know, they see stars because somebody popped them upside the head. We're going to show you how to resolve conflicts quickly. And finally, the 7th skill is we're going to teach you how to build a love legacy that will last long beyond your life, long beyond your children's life. So the skills and the things that you become very, very proficient in, your great grandchildren whom you never may meet in the physical realm will start at so much higher of a plane of existence and understanding that their relationships will be the fulfillment of our dreams. This is a complete system. The program is called Akoma Soul. If you are a brother or sister or couple who is serious about changing the relationship dynamic and all this pseudo talk from all these non-student teachers, then get with us and we can help you to achieve that which is possible, and right now only a glimmer in your eye. So with that, we submit ourselves to you in truth, justice, order, balance, harmony, reciprocity, and propriety. And as always, we greeting you in peace. So I'm going to let Nwasha close us out and say what she got to say. Oh, that's it? That's all you got to say? Okay. She's short, sweet. That's classic Nwasha. Straight to the point. Boom. Potent. Niakoma, y'all. We'll see you next time.